there is a chapter in our story almost forgotten. A name that rarely appears in textbooks, a face blurred in the shadows of evolution. Homo Heidelbergensis. They are not as famous as the Neanderthals, nor as celebrated as our own species. And yet, without them, neither we nor our ancient cousins would exist. Imagine a being who walked the earth nearly 700,000 years ago, tall, broad-shouldered, with a brain larger than most before them. They were hunters, firemakers, survivors of a world both brutal and magnificent. But today, their memory survives in fragments. Skulls dug from the soils of Africa and Europe, jawbones weathered by time, tools buried in forgotten riverbeds. Their name itself is a relic, taken from the German town of Heidelberg, where the first fossil was found. And still, in the grand narrative of human evolution, they are often reduced to a footnote, overshadowed by the species they gave rise to. But here lies the paradox. This forgotten ancestor may have been one of the most important of all. They carried within them the seeds of giants. Their presence shaped the Neanderthals. It set the stage for Denisovans, and it prepared the ground for us, Homo sapiens, a name almost lost to time. And yet, in truth, we are the echo of their survival. And so, if they were so pivotal, why do we barely remember them? Step into the halls of natural history museums, and you will see the familiar faces. Neanderthals reconstructed in lifelike detail, modern humans displayed with pride, even Homo erectus given their rightful place in the spotlight. But look closer, into the glass cases tucked away in corners, and there, half forgotten, lie fragments of Homo Heidelbergensis. Their skulls tell a story of strength, massive brow ridges, wide jaws, and brains capable of thought beyond simple survival. Yet, unlike their cousins, their presence is almost invisible in public imagination. It is as if they have been hidden in the wings of history, despite standing at the very center of our evolutionary stage. Why? Perhaps because their role is complex, not a neat beginning or end, but a bridge. They were neither the first explorers nor the last survivors. They were the silent thread woven between past and future. Their fossils whisper of a lineage that connects Africa to Europe, and eventually to us. And though their bones sit quietly in museums, their influence cannot be silenced. They live on in every one of us who carries the story forward. But influence alone cannot explain their disappearance. By every measure of survival, Homo Heidelbergensis seemed destined to endure. They mastered fire, not merely striking sparks, but tending flames that warmed nights and protected against predators. They crafted hand axes of remarkable precision, symmetrical and sharp, each one a testament to minds capable of planning and skill. They hunted giants, elephants, rhinos, bison. Their strength was carved into their very bodies. Broad chests, powerful arms, and resilience hardened by the Ice Age. For nearly 500,000 years, they thrived across continents, from the open savannas of Africa to the frozen plains of Europe. Archaeological sites show their success written clearly in stone and bone. Tools scattered beside butchered animal remains, spears carved with balance and design, charred wood hinting at campfires that burned long into the night. This was not a species struggling to keep up with nature's demands. This was a species shaping its world, bending survival to its will. And yet, despite their triumphs, their trail vanishes. How could such a flourishing species disappear? What force could erase those who seemed so unbreakable? The answers lie hidden in the silences of prehistory. The fossil record grows quiet around 200,000 years ago. The bones of Homo Heidelbergensis no longer appear. No clear battle, no sudden catastrophe, just absence. Was it climate? The ice ages shifting too violently, pushing them to extinction. Was it competition as their own descendants, early Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, spread across their lands? Or did their strength fail in more subtle ways? Dwindling numbers, isolation, famine. Perhaps they did not vanish at all, but dissolved into the species they birthed, their identity absorbed by the children of their lineage. We are left with questions more haunting than answers. Their disappearance is not a solved puzzle, but a shadow across our history. And yet, their absence only deepens the importance of what came before. For they were not an ending, but a bridge. When we speak of human origins, two names dominate the story: Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Yet behind them both stands a single ancestor, Homo Heidelbergensis. It was they who split into branches. In Europe, their descendants became the Neanderthals, stocky and powerful, adapted to the cold. In Africa, other groups evolved into Homo sapiens, carrying within them the future of humanity itself. In this way, Heidelbergensis was not just another species. They were the crossroads of our family tree, the last common ancestor who bore two futures in their hands. From their genes, two worlds emerged, one that would fade into memory and one that would come to dominate the planet. Imagine the weight of such a role. A species standing between past and future, shaping both without knowing it. Their children became the giants of history. But what of the parents who gave them life? Look closely at the skull of Homo heidelbergensis, and you will see something startling. The heavy brow ridges and wide jaws mark them as ancient. But the rounded brain case, the growing capacity for thought, feels strangely familiar. Their faces seem almost human. Not fully, not yet, but enough to spark recognition. Their tools show the same paradox. Stone hand axes so finely crafted, they reveal an eye for symmetry, a mind that appreciated shape and design. Spears so well balanced they could strike at distance, evidence of foresight and planning. These were not just survivalists. They were thinkers, and perhaps, in the glow of their campfires, they laughed. Perhaps they shared stories in sounds that foreshadowed language. Perhaps they looked at their children and felt the stirrings of something profoundly human: hope. They were not us, but they were the first glimpse of what we would become. And in their shadow, our story begins. Origins: the birth of a giant. 700,000 years ago, the Earth itself was in turmoil. The ice ages were beginning their long grip, pushing climates into violent cycles of cold and warmth. Across Africa, the land was shifting. Lush grasslands could wither into desert, and once quiet rivers could flood with destructive force. It was a world in constant flux, unforgiving, unpredictable, and brutal. And yet, from this chaos, a new kind of being emerged, taller, broader, and smarter than those who came before. They were not as primitive as Homo erectus, yet not fully like us. They belonged to an in-between world, one foot in the past, the other stepping toward the future. These were the first Homo heidelbergensis. Imagine a group standing at the edge of a dry savanna, watching storm clouds roll over the horizon. For them, every day demanded endurance. But nature's cruelty was also its crucible. The shifting earth forced innovation. To survive here was to adapt, to master fire, sharpen stone, and hunt not just for survival, but for dominance. In the turning of this era, Evolution was writing a new chapter. The world's harshness forged resilience, and resilience gave birth to possibility. But how do we truly know these shadows of the past once lived? Their story begins not with legend, but with the silent testimony of bone and stone. The discovery came in fragments. In Zambia, a skull with heavy brow ridges and a massive jaw. The Kabwe, or Broken Hill, cranium. In Ethiopia, another fossil. The Bodo cranium, bearing signs of both strength and surprising brain size. These finds were unmistakably human, and yet not quite. The bones told a story of power. Thick skulls, broad faces, and teeth, built to grind through a harsh diet. But what startled scientists most was what lay inside. Brains larger than almost any before them, hinting at a leap in intelligence. Stone tools found beside these remains carried their own voice. Hand axes, shaped with precision, revealed thought beyond instinct. Here was evidence of a species straddling two worlds. Not as ancient as Homo erectus, not as refined as Homo sapiens, but something in between. And with each discovery, a clearer image formed. Beings who could endure, think, and perhaps even imagine. But fossils alone do not show how they lived. For that, we must turn to the land they conquered and the brutal environments that tested their every breath. Africa, in the Middle Pleistocene, was no easy home. Endless savannas, baked under the sun, then gave way to sudden droughts. Predators prowled the grasslands. Lions larger than today's, hyenas built for bone crushing, and crocodiles waiting in rivers. Survival demanded more than brute strength. It required ingenuity. Homo Heidelbergensis adapted like no hominin before them. They learned to use fire not just as warmth, but as a shield against predators. They hunted in groups, coordinating in ways that showed planning and cooperation. Their tools became more refined, suggesting knowledge passed from one generation to the next. But adaptation was not just physical, it was mental. These were beings who understood the rhythm of seasons, who could track prey across distances, who could endure the failures of famine and still rise again. Their endurance was their genius. To live here, in Africa's crucible, was to learn resilience. And resilience would carry them beyond the savanna, into forests, mountains, and eventually across continents. Yet adaptation alone was not their only strength. Their very bodies had become sculpted by survival, carved by nature into the form of hunters. If you stood beside a Homo Heidelbergensis, you would see a giant among early humans. Some reached heights over 6 feet, with broad chests and thick, muscular limbs. Their bones were dense, built to withstand the crushing demands of life in the wild. They were not fragile creatures. They were forged for survival. Their skulls were striking. Heavy brow ridges framed deep-set eyes, giving them a fierce presence. Their jaws were powerful, able to grind through tough roots and sinew. Every part of their anatomy spoke of endurance, of bodies designed for both persistence hunting and brutal close combat with prey. But this strength was more than physical display. It meant survival during the ice ages, when cold and hunger demanded bodies that could endure immense hardship. They were creatures of might, and yet, behind the raw power of their bodies, something more was stirring. A mind expanding, reaching for possibilities never before seen. The question is, what happens when such strength is paired with an expanding intelligence? Inside those thick skulls, their brains were growing. On average, the brain of Homo Heidelbergensis measured over 200 cubic centimeters, larger than most earlier hominins, and not far from modern humans. This was no coincidence. Bigger brains meant greater processing power, memory, and planning ability. Imagine the difference this made. Hunting no longer depended on chance. It became strategy. They could read landscapes, anticipate animal movements, and prepare ambushes. Their stone tools reflected foresight. Designs repeated, perfected, and carried across generations. This growth in intelligence also suggests something more profound: the beginnings of abstract thought. To shape stone with symmetry is to recognize beauty as well as utility. To plan a hunt days ahead is to imagine the future. But with greater intelligence came greater risks. Larger brains demanded more energy, more food, and more cooperation. Survival now hinged not just on strength, but on shared effort. The expanding mind of Homo Heidelbergensis was the seed of culture, the whisper of humanity forming. And this intelligence allowed them to face challenges once thought impossible: the hunting of giants. The world of Homo Heidelbergensis was filled with creatures of staggering size. Elephants taller than houses, rhinoceroses armored like tanks, and massive bison roamed the plains. These were not prey easily taken down, and yet the evidence tells us they tried and succeeded. But how could they, armed only with stone and wood, face such giants? The answer lies in cooperation. They hunted in groups, surrounding and exhausting their prey, driving animals into traps or ambushes. Wooden spears found at Schöningen, Germany, show balance and craftsmanship so precise they could pierce hide and muscle. This was not blind courage. It was calculated risk. With every hunt came the chance of injury or death. And yet, the rewards were immense: meat, fat, and bone marrow that could feed entire communities. In hunting giants, they revealed their own giant nature. They were not prey scurrying from danger. They were predators who claimed their place at the top of the food chain. And this confidence, this power, drove them farther than ever before, into lands unknown, where new challenges awaited. At some point, Homo Heidelbergensis looked beyond Africa and stepped into the unknown. They crossed rivers, plains, and mountain ranges, entering Europe and Asia. This was one of the first true global expansions of any hominin. In Europe, they encountered colder climates, dense forests, and unfamiliar prey. In Asia, landscapes varied from vast steppes to humid woodlands. Each new land carried dangers, predators they had never faced, winters colder than any African night. Yet they endured. Their migration was not a single journey, but a slow tide of expansion. Generation by generation, they pressed outward, driven by hunger, curiosity, or necessity. Wherever they went, they carried their tools, their fire, and their resilience. This spread across continents, changed not just their geography, but their destiny. For in these new frontiers, isolation and adaptation would begin to shape them into the ancestors of future species. But what did it mean to live in lands of ice and shadow? Europe during the Ice Age was a world of extremes. Glaciers carved through the land, winters lasted for months, and food was scarce. To survive here, Homo Heidelbergensis had to adapt once again. Fire became their shield against the cold. Caves offered shelter. Hunting strategies shifted to match the new prey of the north: reindeer, bison, even mammoths. In Asia, forests demanded different skills: patience, stealth, and knowledge of unfamiliar plants. These adaptations reveal a truth. They were not bound to one landscape. They could survive in ice, in savanna, in forest. Few species in history matched such range, but in adapting to so many worlds, they laid the foundation for something greater: the birth of species to come. From the branches of Homo Heidelbergensis, new stories began. In Europe, their descendants evolved into the Neanderthals, cold-adapted, powerful, and enduring. In Asia, another lineage led to the mysterious Denisovans, and in Africa, their lineage gave rise to us, Homo sapiens. This makes Homo Heidelbergensis more than just another extinct hominin. They were the bridge, the ancestor who carried forward the strength, intelligence, and adaptability that would define humanity's future. Every hand axe shaped by their palms, every fire tended in the night, every hunt against impossible odds. All of it was part of the foundation upon which we stand. They were not the end of a line. They were the seed of many. And in their triumphs and struggles, the blueprint of humanity was written. But if they gave us so much, why then did they themselves disappear? Daily life and struggles. It began with a spark. For millions of years, fire had raged across the earth, wild and untamed. Lightning struck grasslands, forests set ablaze, destruction that no creature controlled. But then, for the first time, a species reached out and claimed it. Homo Heidelbergensis learned not just to fear fire, but to harness it. And in that moment, everything changed. With fire came warmth on freezing nights, a shield against the creeping predators that prowled in darkness. The shadows beyond the flames were filled with lions, hyenas, and wolves. But within the circle of light, safety reigned. Fire turned danger into sanctuary. It cooked their food, unlocking new nutrition and strengthening their bodies. It hardened wooden spears, transforming simple sticks into deadly weapons. It gave them time, hours after sunset, where life could continue, conversations could flow, and bonds could deepen. Imagine a group gathered around a crackling flame, children pressed close to their mothers, hunters resting sore muscles, elders sharing memory. Fire was more than survival. It was a revolution in being. Yet this revolution carried a deeper meaning. The flame was not only a tool of power, it became a gathering place, a symbol. And within its glow, something profoundly human began to awaken. Night in the Pleistocene was a world of fear. The sky stretched wide, filled with unfamiliar sounds. The distant roar of predators, the crack of branches under heavy paws. But for Homo Heidelbergensis, the fire transformed that terror into something else. It became a circle of light against the unknown. Here they gathered. Meat roasted over glowing embers, filling the air with the smell of sustenance. Sparks rose upward like stars, drawing eyes to the heavens. Around the flames, voices carried, perhaps crude at first, but full of meaning. Stories may have been born here, not written or sung as we know them, but gestures, sounds, and memories passed between generations. The fire's glow was more than survival. It created community. It brought individuals closer, teaching them that togetherness was as powerful as strength. And from this circle of light came something enduring. The recognition that survival was not only about muscle or weapon, but about unity. Over time, fire became more than a practical tool. It became the very heart of community. Each flame tended, each ember passed to the next generation, carried with it a sense of continuity. To protect fire was to protect the group. Its light was a promise that no one was alone in the darkness. Perhaps rituals grew around it. The careful feeding of logs, the respect given to embers that refused to die. In fire, they found constancy, a living thread that bound them together. It is easy to see how, in its glow, early humans first glimpsed the meaning of belonging. Fire was not just theirs to use, it was theirs to share. And from this heart of community, they gained the strength to face the wider world, a world ruled by giants. Before the first spear was thrown, before the first beast was faced, there was silence. A hunt was not chaos, but preparation. A test of patience, planning, and trust. Homo Heidelbergensis did not hunt alone. They gathered in groups, their roles divided. Some would chase, others would flank. A few would wait in ambush. Imagine the stillness of dawn, breath held, eyes fixed on the horizon. Communication was more than words. It was gesture, gaze, instinct shared between kin. Their success depended on unity. One mistake could mean injury, or worse. The collapse of the entire group's survival. The tools were ready. Hand axes sharpened, spears hardened in fire. The ground was red, the wind measured, the prey chosen. For them, a hunt was not merely a search for food. It was a ritual of survival, an act that bound them as one. And when the moment came, the stillness shattered, and giants awaited. The prey they faced were not timid deer or small game. They hunted giants, creatures that dwarfed them in size and power. Mammoths roamed the plains, armored in thick hide and curling tusks. Rhinoceroses, massive and unpredictable, could charge with deadly force. Even bison, in herds of hundreds, were formidable opponents. For Homo Heidelbergensis, such prey meant risk beyond measure, but it also meant survival. A single successful hunt could feed dozens, providing not only meat, but fat for energy, hides for warmth, bones for tools. These animals were the very lifeblood of their communities. The evidence remains in fossilized bones bearing cut marks, in campsites scattered with butchery tools, in the preserved wooden spears of Schöningen, weapons balanced with precision, capable of piercing the flesh of giants. But hunting such animals was more than survival. It was an act of defiance against nature itself. To face creatures that could crush or kill them was to claim a place at the top of the food chain. And yet, with every triumph, danger lingered. For against such prey, the cost of failure was always near. A successful hunt was a moment of triumph. The crack of spears striking true, the roar of a fallen beast, the chorus of survival achieved. But triumph was always shadowed by risk. Injuries were common: broken bones, crushed limbs, deep gashes from tusks or horns. Some never healed. Facial evidence shows bones that knit unevenly, wounds that lingered long after the hunt was over. Every strike of a spear carried with it the possibility of death. And even when the kill was won, predators watched from the shadows. Lions and hyenas circled the camps, waiting to snatch meat from exhausted hunters. A single misstep could turn feast into famine. Yet they continued. Why? Because survival demanded it. To risk nothing was to starve. To risk everything was to live. But beyond the hunt, beyond the firelight, there was something deeper that sustained them. The bonds of kinship. At the core of Homo Heidelbergensis life was family. Not family as we define it today, but small bands. Groups bound by necessity and blood. Men, women, children, and elders all carried roles that determined survival. Children learned by watching. The shaping of stone, the tending of fire, the rhythm of a hunt. Women likely gathered plants, cared for the young, and joined in tasks of survival. Elders, though slower, carried memory, knowledge of seasons, of dangers, of where prey once roamed. This web of ties created strength greater than any individual. Alone, survival was fragile. Together, it became endurance. And in this network of roles, humanity's first glimpses of society began to form. But what truly reveals their humanity is not just the structure of their groups. It is the compassion hidden within their bones. Fossil evidence tells stories the bones themselves cannot hide. Skulls with injuries that healed, leg bones once broken but mended, teeth lost long before death. These were not individuals abandoned to die. They were cared for, fed, protected, until they could live again. This compassion suggests something profound. It was not mere instinct to keep numbers strong. It was empathy, the ability to see another suffering and act to ease it. In these healed bones lies the proof that Homo Heidelbergensis was more than animal. They were becoming human in ways that transcend survival. And this empathy led to something even greater: the beginnings of an inner life. What did it mean to live as Homo Heidelbergensis? Beyond the fire and the hunt, there must have been feelings that shaped their world. Joy at the return of hunters, grief at the loss of kin, pride in the survival of children. We cannot know their exact thoughts, but the evidence allows us to imagine. Around the fire, bonds deepened, not just through necessity, but through shared experience. Perhaps they mourned their dead in ways we only faintly recognize, placing bodies with care, protecting their memory. Perhaps they laughed, celebrated, or found comfort in closeness. This emotional core was the first seed of culture. It was here, in these feelings, that the true difference between survival and living emerged. And in these emotions, we glimpse ourselves, fragile, enduring, bound to one another. For it was this inner life, as much as strength or fire, that prepared them for the battles of a harsh and shifting world, tools and innovation. In the story of humanity, some tools became milestones. For Homo Heidelbergensis, none was more defining than the Acheulean hand axe. At first glance, it is simple, a piece of stone chipped into a sharp edge. But look closer, and you see symmetry, balance, and intention. These were not crude flakes struck by chance. They were crafted with vision. The Acheulean hand axe was the Swiss army knife of prehistory. With it, they butchered animals, cut wood, dug for roots, and defended themselves against predators. Its versatility was unmatched, and its design reveals something deeper: the ability to imagine a shape before it existed, to look at a block of stone and see within it a tool waiting to be freed. Each hand axe was more than survival. It was a statement of intelligence, of precision, of hands guided by thought. In its edges, we glimpse the sharpening of the human mind, and yet, tools like these could not be mastered alone. They carried within them something even more profound: knowledge shared across generations. No one is born knowing how to shape stone into symmetry. It had to be taught. A child would watch an elder chip away at rock, mimicking the strikes, learning which blows split the stone clean and which shattered it. Skill was passed hand to hand, mind to mind, across time. This was not instinct like a bird building a nest. It was memory, preserved and communicated. And in teaching, something extraordinary occurred: culture. Knowledge no longer died with the individual. It lived in the group, carried forward like fire passed from ember to ember. Every hand axe was a link in a chain, proof that Homo Heidelbergensis had begun to build not only tools, but traditions. And traditions once formed opened the door to meaning. For perhaps in the hand axe lay something even greater than utility. Some hand axes were so finely crafted, so symmetrical, that they surpass function. Their edges shine with unnecessary perfection, suggesting pride, identity, or even artistry. Why shape a tool beyond what is needed? Because it meant something more. Perhaps a carefully made hand axe was a display of skill, proof of ability, a message to others of strength and intelligence. Perhaps it was a gift, a teaching piece, or even an object of beauty. Whatever the case, these stones suggest that thought had begun to wander beyond the immediate. The Acheulean hand axe was not only a weapon against hunger, it was the first whisper of the abstract, of a mind imagining value beyond survival. And if stone revealed such thought, wood would reveal even more. For hidden in the earth of Europe lay a discovery that rewrote the history of the hunt. In 1995, deep in the soils of Schöningen, Germany, archaeologists uncovered a miracle. Perfectly preserved wooden spears, nearly 300,000 years old. Weapons that should have decayed centuries ago, yet lay intact beneath layers of earth. These spears belonged to Homo Heidelbergensis, straightened from spruce, carved with precision, sharpened to deadly points. They were not clumsy sticks broken in haste, but engineered tools crafted with care. Their discovery stunned the scientific world, for until then, many believed early humans lacked the sophistication to design true hunting weapons. But the Schöningen spears told a different story. They revealed hunters who understood balance, weight, and aerodynamics. They showed a mind capable of transforming raw material into specialized technology. And more than tools, they were evidence of courage. To fashion such weapons was to prepare for battle with giants, beasts that could kill as easily as be killed. The spears revealed something undeniable. Homo Heidelbergensis were not scavengers. They were predators, true hunters. The Schöningen site offered more than spears. Scattered around them were the remains of horses, butchered with skill, bones marked by deliberate cuts. This was not chance. It was proof of organized hunting. Homo Heidelbergensis hunted not alone, but in groups. One would drive the herd, others would flank. A final strike delivered with precision spears. This was strategy, requiring communication, planning, and trust. For the first time in human history, the line between prey and predator began to blur. They were no longer scavengers, taking what lions left behind. They were hunters, capable of shaping the outcome of survival. This changed everything. It meant predictable food supplies, more protein for growing brains, and a new confidence in facing the wild. But it also meant new dangers, for every successful hunt brought them face to face with the razor edge between triumph and tragedy. And yet, their spears themselves reveal something even more: the beginnings of engineering. The Schöningen spears were crafted with balance in mind, thicker at the base for grip, tapered at the point for penetration, weighted to fly straight when thrown. Their design mirrors modern javelins. Such precision is no accident. This reveals a striking truth. Homo Heidelbergensis did not merely react to their world. They anticipated it. They thought ahead to the moment a spear left the hand, to the distance it traveled, to the strike it would deliver. Every detail reflects minds not only surviving, but engineering, creating with foresight, with purpose. And that foresight did not end with weapons. It began to shape their entire way of thinking, opening the door to cooperation, imagination, and culture. Tools are frozen moments of thought. A hand axe or spear is not built for now, but for later. For the hunt that has not yet begun, the prey that has not yet appeared. This ability to think ahead marks a profound leap. Homo Heidelbergensis were learning to imagine futures. A sharpened spear was a promise of meat days later. A perfected hand axe was security against hunger weeks away. Survival was no longer reaction, it was anticipation. And anticipation is the seed of strategy, of minds envisioning what does not yet exist. But planning alone cannot sustain innovation. To flourish, it required something greater: the rise of cooperation. Innovation is never solitary. A hand axe takes a teacher, a learner, and practice repeated across generations. A spear takes more than one to wield effectively. Tools are not just objects, they are networks of knowledge. This suggests that Homo Heidelbergensis were not only inventors, but collaborators. Teaching required patience, imitation, perhaps even the beginnings of language. Hunting with spears required timing, coordination, and trust. Through tools, cooperation became their greatest strength. It bound them together, turned survival into shared achievement, and gave birth to the first whispers of society. And society brings with it something even deeper, the stirrings of culture. Each tool was more than stone or wood. It was a marker of identity, a story carried forward. A hand axe said, "We know how to endure." A spear said, "We are hunters of giants." These were not only objects of survival, but objects of meaning. Here lies the first spark of culture, knowledge shaping tradition, tools shaping memory. The act of making was as important as the act of using. It created continuity, a sense that their lives were part of something larger than themselves. In this, Homo Heidelbergensis planted the seeds of what would one day become art, ritual, and legacy. And from these seeds, we begin to glimpse the shape of humanity itself. Minds at work, striving towards something greater, survival in a harsh world. The Pleistocene was an age of instability. The earth shifted between searing heat and crushing cold, cycles that could last tens of thousands of years. Glaciers advanced like slow-moving giants, grinding landscapes beneath their weight. Then, just as suddenly, they retreated, leaving behind vast plains scorched by summer heat. For life, it was an endless gamble. For Homo Heidelbergensis, this world was home. They were born into its chaos, shaped by its demands. In one generation, grasslands might stretch as far as the eye could see. In the next, those same plains would vanish beneath ice. The shifting climate meant prey disappeared, water sources dried, and familiar trails dissolved into wasteland. But instability was also opportunity. A species unable to adapt would vanish. Yet Homo Heidelbergensis endured. They moved with the rhythms of the earth, tracking herds across continents, learning to exploit every niche. Where the land shifted, they shifted too. Still, survival in such a volatile world came at a cost. Each swing of climate tested them, pushing them to their limits. It was not strength alone that carried them through, but ingenuity, and a resilience as relentless as the ice itself. And when the frozen seasons descended, their endurance was tested most of all. Imagine winters that never ended. Temperatures plunged, winds howled like predators, and snow blanketed the land for months at a time. For Homo Heidelbergensis, these were not rare events. They were the reality of life in Ice Age Europe. Food was scarce. Herds of animals migrated away, leaving only the hardiest prey behind. Plants withered, water froze solid, and even breathing in the frigid air could feel like swallowing knives. To survive, they needed more than muscle. They needed strategy. They dressed themselves in hides stripped from animals, fashioned shelters in caves, or built windbreaks from wood and stone. They learned to endure hunger, conserving energy during lean months, waiting for the return of spring. These frozen seasons were merciless, but they forged a species capable of extraordinary endurance. For every cold night survived, they emerged stronger, more united. Yet no matter how much they adapted, the Ice Age's storms demanded more. Fire, ingenuity, and shelter against the storm's unrelenting power. When the cold bore down, fire became more than warmth. It became life itself. Its glow turned darkness into refuge, its heat a defense against the freezing winds. Around it, Homo Heidelbergensis huddled close, bodies pressed together, keeping the cold at bay. Shelter was just as vital. Caves offered natural protection, their stone walls shielding against snow and predators alike. Where no caves existed, they built with what they had. Branches lashed together, hides stretched across frames, crude but effective barriers against the elements. Survival demanded constant vigilance. Fires had to be tended, shelters repaired, fuel gathered even in blizzards. It was a battle against exhaustion, a fight not for comfort, but for existence. And yet, in these moments, ingenuity flourished. They were not merely enduring the storms, they were learning to master them. But even as the ice receded, danger never left their world. For beyond the cold waited challenges just as fierce: the giants they hunted and the predators that hunted them. Across the frozen plains and grassy steppes roamed creatures of staggering size. Mammoths with tusks like sweeping towers, rhinoceroses armored in thick hide, bison in herds of hundreds. These were the giants of the Pleistocene, and for Homo Heidelbergensis, they were both opportunity and peril. Hunting such beasts required courage beyond measure. Spears hardened in fire were their weapons, strategy their shield. Groups would stalk their prey for hours, perhaps days, watching, waiting for the right moment. Some hunters drove the herd, others flanked from the side, while a final strike pierced the weakest animal. Success meant abundance. A single mammoth could feed dozens, its meat stored, its fat fueling bodies through winter, its bones carved into tools. But failure meant disaster, wasted energy, crushed bodies beneath hooves, lives lost in pursuit of survival. Still, they did not turn away. To hunt giants was to claim a place at the top of the food chain. And with every successful kill, they proved themselves not as scavengers of scraps, but as predators who could bend nature's strength to their will. Yet even as they claimed this power, the shadows of danger never retreated, for they were not the only hunters who walked the land. Life for Homo Heidelbergensis was lived under constant threat. Lions far larger than today's prowled the grasslands. Hyenas with bone-crushing jaws followed close behind. Saber-toothed cats lurked in ambush, their fangs capable of piercing bone. Wolves traveled in relentless packs. These predators were not distant dangers, they were daily realities. A fire left untended, a child wandering too far, a wounded hunter left behind. Each could end in tragedy. Yet these same predators shaped resilience. They forced vigilance, sharpened instincts, and made cooperation essential. A lone hunter might fall, but a group standing together could hold the line. Predators circled constantly, waiting for weakness. And so, every night around the fire, every moment spent guarding the edges of camp, was a reminder that survival was never secure. But their world was not divided into predator and prey. It was a balance, fragile and shifting, where Homo Heidelbergensis walked a razor's edge. In the wild landscapes of the Pleistocene, Homo Heidelbergensis held no guarantees. They were hunters, yes, but they were also hunted. Each step into the plains was a gamble, each hunt a wager against nature itself. Their power lay not in fangs or claws, but in fire, tools, and unity. Yet predators tested those defenses constantly, reminding them of their precarious place in the food chain. They lived in a balance of power, both predator and prey. And it was this fragile balance that defined their world. But survival was never about strength alone. More dangerous than any predator were the invisible threats: hunger, isolation, and the fragility of life itself. When the herds vanished, hunger stalked them more cruelly than any predator. Droughts dried the rivers, winters drove prey far away, and hunts ended in bitter failure. Entire groups faced days, even weeks, with little to eat. In such times, survival demanded sacrifice. Bones were cracked open for marrow, every scrap of hide boiled into meager broth. They learned to stretch what little they had, to endure the gnawing emptiness in their stomachs. But famine was more than hunger. It tested unity. Would groups share their last scraps or fracture under the strain? Archaeological evidence suggests cooperation endured, proof that survival was collective, not individual. Still, the threat of scarcity lingered, always waiting, always pressing them toward the brink. And hunger was not the only peril. Even the simplest accident could unravel the fragile fabric of their existence. Life in the Pleistocene carried no safety net. A slip on wet stone, a fall during a hunt, a broken limb, each could mean death. Injuries we would shrug off today could prove fatal without care. Yet fossils tell us another story. Bones healed, teeth lost, but lives prolonged. This meant they were not abandoned. Others tended to them, brought food, offered protection. Injury revealed both the fragility of survival and the strength of compassion. But even care could not shield against another danger: isolation. Small groups of Homo Heidelbergensis wandered vast landscapes. When cut off from others, by distance, by disaster, by chance, isolation became a silent predator. Fewer hands meant fewer hunters. Fewer voices meant less knowledge passed on. Genetic diversity dwindled, weakening resilience. An isolated group was a group at risk. Isolation threatened extinction not with violence, but with silence. And it was in fighting this silence that their resilience became most visible. For even in the harshest odds, they endured. Survival for Homo Heidelbergensis was never guaranteed. It was fragile, uncertain, bought with struggle each day, and yet they persisted for nearly 500,000 years. Their resilience was not invincibility. It was a constant negotiation with nature, a refusal to yield. They bent without breaking, adapted without surrendering. Every fire tended, every hunt endured, every injury healed was an act of triumph against the odds. They remind us that survival is never destiny. It is choice, persistence, and unity. Fragile triumphs stitched together against a hostile world. And it was this resilience, as much as fire or tools, that carried them into history, culture, mind, and spirit. Beneath layers of earth, in caves and riverbanks across Africa and Europe, bones have been uncovered that raise haunting questions. Some appear not to have been left to chance. They suggest that Homo Heidelbergensis may have been the first to place their dead in the ground. At sites like Atapuerca in Spain, remains were found deep within cave systems, deliberately placed in chambers where no animal could have carried them. In Bodo, Ethiopia, a skull bears signs of careful cutting. Not random marks, but possibly an act of ritual defleshing. These discoveries force us to wonder, were these simply practical acts or something more profound? If deliberate, then this was a turning point in human consciousness. For to bury the dead is to acknowledge death itself, to see life as more than survival, to see the body as more than flesh. It suggests memory, care, and perhaps even the stirrings of belief. Imagine the weight of that moment. a group standing around the body of one of their own, pausing, reflecting, perhaps even grieving. This was not mere biology. It was the first whisper of humanity's inner life. But were these true burials? Or are we reading too much into bones weathered by time? Archaeologists debate the meaning of these finds. Were bodies placed in caves intentionally, or did floods and natural forces sweep them there? Were cut marks signs of ritual, or simply butchering gone awry? The evidence remains uncertain, shrouded in time's erosion. Skeptics argue that calling them burials risks romanticizing the past. Bones may have accumulated naturally, and what we see as ritual could be coincidence. After all, the line between practical survival and symbolic thought is thin. Yet others insist the patterns are too deliberate. Too many remains placed too carefully. Too many signs of attention to the dead. If even one of these acts was intentional, then the leap was enormous. This debate reveals something striking. We are searching not just for bones, but for the first traces of meaning. Was Homo Heidelbergensis beginning to grasp mortality itself? And if so, what does it mean when a species first looks upon death and recognizes its weight? If these were burials, then Homo Heidelbergensis crossed a threshold no species had before. To lay a body in the earth is to acknowledge absence. It is to recognize that someone who once walked, spoke, and hunted is gone, yet still matters. This act suggests grief, the ache of loss, the pull of memory. Perhaps it also hints at belief, that something of the dead endured, that the boundary between life and death was not absolute. In this possibility lies the spark of the sacred. It may have been small at first, a simple act of covering a body with earth or placing it in a cave, but within it lay the seed of ritual, of culture, of spiritual imagination. The act itself mattered, even if no words explained why. From these sparks, the fire of humanity's inner world would grow. And if they could recognize death, what about the voice of life? The sounds they made to bind the living together. The anatomy of Homo Heidelbergensis reveals a tantalizing possibility. Their throats, hyoid bones, and enlarged brain capacity suggest they were capable of producing a range of sounds far beyond grunts. Not yet full speech, but something richer, more varied. This matters profoundly. Complex sounds mean communication, the ability to coordinate hunts, teach tool making, or call out warnings. It also means emotion could be shared, comfort given through tone, reassurance carried in voice. Imagine a mother calling her child back from danger, a hunter signaling silently to his group, a shared cry of triumph after a successful kill. These were not the silent creatures of instinct. They were beings with voices shaping their world. Theirs was the first true step toward language, and with it came a revolution, not of tools, but of minds. But what exactly were they saying? Were their sounds still animal cries, or did meaning begin to grow within them? Communication for Homo Heidelbergensis may have been the difference between life and death. To stalk giants required signals. To teach a child stonecrafting required explanation. Gesture alone could not suffice. Their growing brains and vocal tracts allowed them to combine sound and action into something new. They may not have spoken in sentences, but meaning was there. A call to warn of danger, a rhythm of sound to rally a hunt, a pattern of tone to soothe an infant. These were the beginnings of shared thought, language not yet born, but stirring. And in this, something greater began to form, bonds that went beyond necessity. Communication was not just survival, it was belonging. It was identity. But sounds, once shared, can carry more than commands. They can carry ideas, and ideas are the first sparks of symbolic thought. When sounds began to carry meaning, imagination awoke. To describe something not present, to name a memory, to hint at the future. This is symbolic thought. It is the foundation of story, of art, of culture. For Homo Heidelbergensis, these first sparks may have been crude, but they were profound. A sound for water, a gesture for hunt tomorrow, a signal for danger ahead. These were abstractions, turning survival into communication about what was unseen. In this leap lies the earliest echo of our own voices, and where voices carried meaning, faces carried emotion, shared in the firelight of their nights together. Picture a group of Homo Heidelbergensis gathered around the fire. The crackle of flames, the glow on their faces, the cold pressed back by heat. Here, life was more than survival. It was community. In the firelight, stories may have been born, not as we know them, but in gestures, sounds, and shared memories. Children learned by watching. Elders recalled past hunts. Laughter may have echoed, proof that joy existed even in harshness. Fear was shared too, in the tightening of shoulders, the closeness of bodies. These moments reveal the emotional texture of their lives. They were not only enduring the world, they were reflecting on it, together. The firelight framed more than faces. It framed humanity's first sense of belonging, and belonging carried weight. For with it came love, loss, and memory. The bones of Homo Heidelbergensis reveal healed injuries, survivors who lived long after wounds that should have killed them. This tells us something profound. They cared. A broken leg would have left a hunter useless, unless others fed and protected him. Toothless skulls show elders living long after they could no longer chew, unless someone prepared their food. This was not instinct alone. It was empathy. They saw another's suffering and chose to act. Within that choice lay the stirrings of love, of connection that endured even through hardship. And when one of their own died, perhaps grief followed. Perhaps memory lingered, carried in gestures, in silence, in the careful placement of a body. In these acts, we glimpse the first deep emotions that defined us, and in them, the first true glimpse of humanity itself. In burials that may have been deliberate, in voices that began to carry meaning, in compassion etched into healed bones, we see the first echoes of ourselves. Homo Heidelbergensis lived in a world of cold, hunger, and danger. Yet within that struggle, they nurtured fire, forged tools, hunted giants, and cared for one another. They were not fully us, but they were not fully other. They were the threshold. To look upon their legacy is to see humanity in its infancy, a people standing at the edge of survival, yet reaching for something greater. In their rituals, we glimpse our own religions. In their voices, our own language. In their empathy, our own love. They were the first to show that being human is more than flesh and bone. It is memory, connection, and meaning. And in that reflection, we see not only who they were, but who we are, conflict and fate. For nearly 500,000 years, Homo Heidelbergensis thrived across Africa, Europe, and Asia. But time and distance began to change them. Populations separated by mountains, rivers, and shifting climates slowly diverged into new forms. Evolution was splintering the lineage. In Europe, isolation under Ice Age conditions carved them into Neanderthals. Their bodies grew shorter and stockier, built for the brutal cold. Their faces shifted. Their culture took shape, They would endure as powerful hunters of the north. In Africa, another story unfolded. Here, some groups of Homo Heidelbergensis developed differently. They grew taller, more graceful, their minds more expansive. These populations would eventually give rise to Homo sapiens, us. And in Asia, other branches splintered again, giving rise to the mysterious Denisovans, whose traces survive not in bones, but in our very DNA. It is here we find the paradox of Homo Heidelbergensis. They did not fade quietly into extinction. They fractured, and from their divisions came the giants of prehistory and the species that would one day rule the world. But if they were the parents of such children, what became of them? Their story did not end in triumph, but in struggle against the very descendants they created. Every human alive today carries echoes of Homo Heidelbergensis. Not directly, but through the children they gave us. The Neanderthals, Denisovans, and ultimately ourselves all inherited their resilience, their intelligence, their fire. When you speak, when you plan, when you stand upright and stride forward, you carry fragments of their ancient design. Their bloodline did not vanish. It flowed onward, branching into the species that shaped history. Genetic studies confirm it. Neanderthal DNA lives on in us. Denisovan traces linger in populations across Asia and Oceania. Each fragment is a reminder that our story is not singular, but shared. The human family tree is tangled, its roots entwined, its branches overlapping. Homo Heidelbergensis was the trunk from which much of this growth emerged. Their legacy is not written in monuments or artifacts, but in us. But if their children endured, where did the parents go? To answer that, we must imagine what happened when parent and child walked the earth together. There must have been moments when late Homo Heidelbergensis looked into the eyes of their own descendants. Imagine Europe 300,000 years ago. Small bands of emerging Neanderthals encountering their predecessors. Kin, yet rivals. In Africa, early Homo sapiens may have crossed paths with the last of their forebears, both shaped by the same land, both hungry for survival. What did these encounters mean? Did they recognize themselves in one another? The familiar brow, the shared firelight? Or did difference mark them as strangers? The truth may lie somewhere in between. Perhaps they exchanged knowledge. Perhaps they competed for food. Perhaps both, but one fact is inescapable. They were no longer alone at the top of their world. Their children had arrived, and they were stronger, more specialized, more adaptable. And when two closely related species meet in a world of scarce resources, the struggle is inevitable. The Pleistocene was not generous. Land, prey, and water shifted with the changing climate. For Homo Heidelbergensis, this meant constant movement. But everywhere they went, their children were already there. Neanderthals in Europe, early Homo sapiens in Africa. Competition was not abstract, it was survival. Two hunters seeking the same herd. Two groups claiming the same cave. Two families fighting for the same river. These clashes may not have been wars as we know them, but they were conflicts, silent and relentless. Over generations, the balance shifted. Neanderthals, better adapted to cold, held the north. Sapiens, more agile and cognitively advanced, thrived in Africa. The territories of Homo Heidelbergensis shrank. They were not defeated in a single battle. They were edged out generation by generation, displaced not by strangers, but by their own descendants, and so began their fading. A requiem played quietly across continents. The end of Homo Heidelbergensis was not dramatic. No single catastrophe erased them. Instead, their presence dwindled, their numbers thinned, their identity dissolved into those they had birthed. Some may have been absorbed into Neanderthals or early sapiens, their genes surviving, though their name did not. Others may have been pushed into marginal lands, where famine and isolation erased them completely. It was extinction not by fire but by silence. Their children inherited the earth, while the parents slipped into shadow. And when they were gone, only fragments of bone remained to tell their story. Around 200,000 years ago, the fossil trail of Homo Heidelbergensis fades. Sites that once revealed their tools and bones fall quiet. No more crania emerge from the earth. No more hand axes mark their camps. It is as if they stepped off the stage of history, leaving only echoes. Why so suddenly? The disappearance is a puzzle. They had endured for hundreds of thousands of years, through ice ages and droughts, through predators and famine. And yet, in the span of a geological blink, they were gone. The silence in the record forces us to ask, what truly happened? Was it assimilation, extinction, or both? The fossil trail is a reminder that history is fragile. Entire species can vanish, leaving us only shadows, unanswered questions written in stone. And into this silence, theories emerge. Attempts to explain how giants could vanish so quietly. Some scientists argue climate collapse delivered the final blow. As ice age cycles grew harsher, their range shrank beyond recovery. Others suggest disease, striking small groups and spreading unchecked. Still others believe assimilation was the answer, that they were absorbed into the Neanderthals and early sapiens they created. Each theory is plausible. None is certain. What we know is that by 200,000 years ago, Homo Heidelbergensis had vanished as a distinct species. The mystery of their disappearance lingers, a question suspended between fact and speculation. But behind the theories lies a deeper truth. Survival was never promised. The story of Homo Heidelbergensis reminds us that survival is fragile. They were strong, intelligent, and resilient, yet none of these guaranteed their future. They endured for nearly 500,000 years, longer than our own species has yet existed. And still, they fell. Not because they were weak, but because the world shifted and others took their place. Their fate is a warning carved into prehistory. To be human is to live on the edge of extinction, to walk a fragile line where resilience is tested again and again. And yet, even in their disappearance, they endure, not in name, but in blood, in memory, in the legacy carried within us all. Legacy, their blood and ours. Every lineage reaches a crossroads, and for Homo Heidelbergensis, that moment defined the future of humanity. They were the bridge species, the ones who carried two destinies within their bones. In Europe, isolation under glacial skies carved their descendants into Neanderthals. Powerful, cold-adapted hunters who thrived in frozen landscapes. In Africa, other groups followed a different path. Their bodies became leaner, their minds more flexible, their societies more intricate. From them came Homo sapiens, one species, two futures. It is a paradox written into our past, that survival split their legacy, shaping different children for different worlds. And in Asia, yet another branch took root, giving rise to the Denisovans, a people we know not from faces, but from genes that still whisper in us today. This branching was not chance. It was the result of adaptation, the same resilience that allowed Homo Heidelbergensis to survive 500,000 years also ensured that, even in their absence, their children would endure. They are the trunk of our tangled family tree, the moment when possibility unfolded into diversity, Without them, the great human story would be a shorter, emptier tale. But their influence was not only genetic. In their tools, their bonds, and their way of life, they laid the very groundwork for what we now call culture. Culture does not begin with writing, music, or monuments. Its roots lie in something older, simpler, but no less profound: shared knowledge. Homo Heidelbergensis crafted tools with precision, teaching each generation to shape stone into hand axes and spears. These were more than implements; they were traditions. Skills passed on, memories preserved. They hunted together, planned together, endured winters by firelight. These acts required communication, cooperation, and trust. In caring for their sick, in tending their fires, they built social bonds that went beyond survival. Here, in these patterns, we see the foundations of culture: knowledge preserved, empathy expressed, identity formed. They were not just surviving, they were creating continuity. And though the world changed, that continuity never broke. It flowed onward into Neanderthals, into sapiens, into us. But their greatest gift is not only in culture or tools. It is in the very blood that still flows through our veins. For decades, Homo Heidelbergensis was seen only in fossils and tools. But today, genetics reveals their legacy runs deeper. Studies of ancient DNA show that both Neanderthals and Denisovans, direct descendants of Heidelbergensis, contributed to the modern human genome. This means their echoes live on inside us, in immune systems strengthened by Neanderthal genes, in the high-altitude adaptations of Tibetan peoples, inherited from Denisovans, in fragments scattered through our chromosomes like whispers from deep time. When you breathe, fight disease, or endure harsh climates, you may be drawing upon ancient gifts from Homo Heidelbergensis. Their mark is subtle, yet indelible. Extinction did not erase them. It reshaped them, weaving them into the story of every human alive today. And if their blood endures, so too does their example. For their survival, across 500,000 years, offers lessons about endurance and adaptability that remain as relevant now as they were then. Few species in human history can claim such longevity. Homo Heidelbergensis survived for nearly 500,000 years, longer than Homo sapiens has yet existed. Their endurance was not luck. It was resilience, honed against some of the harshest conditions the planet has ever known. They lived through Ice Age winters, where the sun seemed to vanish. They endured droughts that stripped the land bare. They faced predators larger and deadlier than any we know today, and still, they survived. How? Through adaptation. They mastered fire, crafted weapons, spread across continents, and worked together in ways that magnified their strength. They were not invincible, but they were persistent, enduring setbacks that would have destroyed less adaptable creatures. This longevity alone is a lesson. It tells us that survival is not about dominance or power, but about the ability to bend, to change, to endure. And in this endurance, they handed us a legacy, one that whispers across time. Survival is not inevitable, but it is possible. But what does this mean for us today, in a world facing its own crises? The answer lies in the greatest gift they left us, the instinct to adapt. If Homo Heidelbergensis teaches us anything, it is that survival belongs not to the strongest, but to the most adaptable. They thrived in climates that shifted from blistering heat to crushing cold. They moved from Africa's savannas to Europe's glaciers to Asia's forests, altering their tools, strategies, and even bodies to fit each new world. Their story reminds us that rigidity is death. To survive is to bend with the storm, not break beneath it. This was their true legacy. The knowledge, etched into our very biology, that endurance comes through change. For us, this lesson is sharper than ever. In the face of modern challenges, climate change, dwindling resources, global upheaval, their history is not ancient myth, but present warning. Adaptation saved them for 500,000 years. Will it save us too? When we look at Homo Heidelbergensis, we do not just see the past, we see ourselves. They faced a world of uncertainty, changing climates, scarce food, predators on every horizon. We face our own uncertainties, rising seas, warming skies, a planet shifting beneath our feet. Their resilience is a mirror held to our struggles. Like them, we depend on cooperation, on shared knowledge, on innovation. Like them, we stand at the edge of survival, never guaranteed, always fragile. But there is a difference. They endured for 500,000 years without altering the planet on a scale that threatened their own existence. We, in a mere fraction of that time, have reshaped the Earth so profoundly that our survival hangs in balance. Their story is not just history, it is a challenge, a reminder that adaptability must guide us if we are to avoid their fate. And if their lessons still resonate, so too does their disappearance. For every flame burns out, no matter how long it shines. For hundreds of thousands of years, Homo Heidelbergensis burned brightly across continents. But then, like a flame deprived of oxygen, they slipped away. Around 200,000 years ago, their fossil trail ends. No great disaster marks their passing, no sudden catastrophe carved into stone. Instead, they vanish quietly, absorbed into the species they gave rise to. It is a haunting silence. A people who endured for 500,000 years, reduced to fragments of bone and echoes in DNA. Their extinction is less an ending than a transition, a flame that dimmed so others could burn. And yet, their absence is felt. They remind us that even the strongest, even the most enduring, cannot hold back time forever. But though their flame has vanished, the light it cast did not. It still glows in us, carried forward in blood, in culture, in memory. Extinction did not erase Homo Heidelbergensis. It transformed them. Their legacy endures in the Neanderthals, in the Denisovans, and most profoundly, in us. Every human alive today carries fragments of their story. In genes, in traditions, in the very act of surviving. Their fire is our fire. Their tools are the ancestors of our technology. Their resilience is the model upon which our own is built. In every heartbeat, in every act of survival, they live on. But their greatest gift is not only what they gave us. It is the reminder of what it means to be human. The story of Homo Heidelbergensis is not just about extinction. It is about inheritance. They vanished, but through their children, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Sapiens, their blood, their fire, their vision endures. What does it mean to be human? It means to stand on fragile ground knowing survival is never certain, yet striving for more. It means to carry memory, compassion, and imagination, even in the face of extinction. It means to be the echo of those who came before. Their fate is a warning, but also a gift, a reminder that our place on this earth is not guaranteed. We walk the same fragile line they once did, and in remembering them, we remember ourselves.